I remember years ago, I think it was probably high school, talking to one of my friends about Christianity. And there was a friend who had grown up being involved in some church activities, who had gone to camp with me. And surprisingly, meeting his disdain as I was uh, explaining to him how important church was. He had heard the gospel, he had heard the biblical teachings many times before, but he had come to a conclusion that Christianity was not for him. Because, as he said, why would I want to be a Christian? You guys are so needy and dependent. And he explained he hated how Christians were taught to rely on God because he believed in self reliance. He was very much a self made man, and he wanted to provide for himself and not have to rely on anybody else for help. To have to lean on anybody was foolishness to his eyes and to his ears, and possibly to his eyes. And I was honestly kind of annoyed at his comment. I kind of sat with it and thought to myself, like, where did this guy get the nerve? Like, where does he get this idea? Uh, and then thinking for a little while, realizing he's right. This guy was absolutely right. He actually understands our faith quite well. His theology of us is actually quite correct. We are indeed needy and dependent people, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all. We actually see that today as we're continuing our series in the book of Matthew, where we've seen over the last few weeks Jesus' miracles one after another, as well as his teachings about the new kingdom to come. And today we have him performing more miracles, precisely two. One for a girl who is dying or has died, and with a woman who has a severe long-term illness. And in his interactions with them, we actually begin to see what this new kingdom will be like. That is a kingdom for the needy, for the most dependent people, those who are the most desperate, the very people that my friend could not stand. And I want us to see, and my hope is that this passage will show us Jesus' heart in his interactions with these people, because here is where we get a very clear sense of his compassion for such people. This is the king's heart for the humble, the desperate, and the unclean. And these are the people who have his heart. These are the people who own the kingdom of God, essentially. And these are the three people we will focus on. So let's start with our first one. God's heart lies with the humble. God's heart lies with the humble. If you look at verse 18 and 19 with me, this is where we find him speaking to John's disciple, as we heard from last week with Pastor Abe preaching, and they are interrupted by a man coming for help. Verse 18. While he was saying these things to them, behold, a ruler came in and knelt before him, saying, my daughter has just died. But come and lay your hand on her, and she will live. And Jesus rose and followed him with his disciples. All right, this man is simply described as a ruler, which doesn't seem to give us a lot of information. But we hear from Mark and Luke's account of this story that his name is Jairus, and he is a synagogue ruler, which actually tells us a lot about him. He's a community leader. He's wealthy. He's the board member of the. He's in the board of the synagogue. He's in charge of the order and the progress of worship. He's in charge of the finances and the building maintenance of the synagogue. And because it's likely an elected position, he is very highly respected by the community. Now, knowing all these things about Jairus, to have him come before Jesus and to kneel before him says a lot. Because if you consider who Jairus works with, it would be primarily the people who hate Jesus the most. The Pharisees, the scribes, those who saw Jesus as their greatest threat. Those who considered Jesus a heretic, a blasphemer. They would have never come before Jesus to kneel down. They would have seen anybody working with Jesus or anybody coming to plead with Jesus as working with the enemy. And yet here we have Jairus, desperate and clearly in need of help from Jesus. And him kneeling before Jesus is a sign of respect and humility and pleading. He's lowering himself before someone who he thinks has power that he does not. We find out that his daughter has died. And Jairus believes genuinely that Jesus can do something about this. He's clearly heard of Jesus' work from word of mouth. He's heard of his miracles, and he thinks that Jesus can do more than just cast out demons or heal the sick. He says, Jesus, raise my dead daughter. back to life. That's why he throws caution to the wind. He kneels before public enemy number one, and he says, "Help me." And he most certainly will face repercussions for this. You have to remember, especially from Mark and Luke's account, that this is in a crowd of people. In other words, this is in the public sphere where people can see him. He's going to face repercussions. At best, reprimanded, maybe lose his job. At worst, maybe cast out by the religious leaders and maybe even suffer the same treatment that Jesus will later on receive. And regardless, his daughter's plight has brought him to this situation. In front of Jesus, knelt down and in need of help. See, death has rendered all that he has into nothing. What can his power or his influence or his wealth do for him now? Would any of these things save his daughter? Right? Therefore, in this moment, the consequences no longer matter to him. And so he humbles himself and gets down on his knees and he pleads for help. You see, Jairus is very similar to the centurion in chapter 8 who comes before Jesus with a very similar plea as his servant is ill at home. Both men in high positions humble themselves before Jesus. And both men place their faith in this radical teacher that their higher-ups hate. And both men are received with gentleness and compassion from Jesus. Let me stop there and ask us a question. Friends, are you willing to humble yourself before God? I'm not asking, and I want to hear very, very clearly, I'm not asking if you believe that humility before God is a good thing or even a biblical thing. Because I think generally, for those of us in a church, most of us would agree that's a good thing. Most of us would agree theologically that is right. We should be humble before the Lord. But I'm actually asking, have you actually humbled yourself before him? See, herein lies the danger. We can theologically agree and yet not live it out. Right? We can agree that it's good to be humble before God and yet still be proud before God. And this is a deadly mistake. But think about it this way. Who actually approaches Jesus? Who actually approaches him and pleads for help? Because it's not the proud. It's those who are like Jairus, who are truly recognizing and realizing how much they need help. It is the truly humble. Those who realize they can't solve their own issues, but rather they need God to help them. Right? The one who actually sees their need is the one who actually bows before God, not the one who believes and doesn't do anything. The one who does not believe they need God will never live it out. And the one who does not see his need for God will not kneel before God. My friends, the proud do not need God. And that is the downfall. In Proverbs chapter 16, verse 5, it says, "Everyone who is arrogant in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Be assured he will not go unpunished." In James 4, verse 6, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. He is turned against the proud. He is sad when it comes to the proud because the proud never go to him. They reject him. My friends, it's not just a matter of theology, but salvation. Our pride is what prevents us from kneeling before the King. If you do not kneel before the King, you will not be part of his kingdom. Let us not fool ourselves. My friends, we cannot be proud before the King. Now, practically, what does it look like to be humble before God? What does it look like practically, okay? Now, very simply, first off, the view of yourself changes. When we actually humble ourselves before God, the view of our accomplishments, our successes, it changes drastically. Right? Jairus found that all that he had worked for amounted to nothing. All that he had gained for himself could not save his daughter. All that he could turn to turned out to be powerless. None of his accomplishments could bring her back. His connections could not answer death, and even his wealth could not buy an extra day with her. And so he turned to the one who was able. The one who is able to change all these things. You see, when we humble ourselves before God, all the things that we once defined ourselves by, our wealth, our power, our glory, our acceptance, all these treasures that we used to live for, they begin to lose their power over us. You begin to hold loosely to these things. We're not easily rattled when we lose these things because we recognize they don't actually give our life meaning anymore. Right? They can't save me, so why would I hold fast to these things? And on the other hand, ironically, it's the most proud people who are the most anxious and most rattled. Right? They still believe they can fix themselves with their problems, from their problems. And they want to hold on to this lie that they can be their own savior, and yet life tells us otherwise. You see, for the humbled, there is a peace that goes beyond understanding. Right? In all situations, especially in the most difficult ones, we find that our soul actually finds peace. Because we kneel before the one who is able to take care of us. And we recognize he is able to save us. And he has. You see, true humility before the king frees us to suffer well. It doesn't make suffering painless or easy, but it strengthens our resolve to suffer with joy. Not suffer in happiness, but to suffer in joy, which means we have our eyes fixed on the one who stands before us, the one who is able to undo all things and all the darkness of this world, and recognize that we are in his care, and that is a good place to be. That is the best place to be. It also means that for those of us who kneel before God, you will find that your king always receives you with gentleness and compassion. Romans 10, verse 13, it says, all who call upon the name of the Lord will be saved. And that is an amazing truth. All who call upon the name will be saved. That means those who kneel before him and plead for help will always receive gentleness and compassion. Those who come to him and say, Jesus, I can't do anything for myself, but you can. You're the only one who can save me. You will always find acceptance from him. Right, last week we baptized 12 of our brothers and sisters who recounted their testimonies and told us how they were saved by this king. They knelt before their king and said, I need you, and they were all met in the same way. With a God who said, yes, come. I'll take care of you. And there is the great assurance we have, that those of us who genuinely call upon him will always be received. Not one single humbled heart will be turned away. You won't be rejected. You won't be ignored, not condemned. My friends, this is an incredible peace that we have. Second, God's heart lies with the desperate. So first, his heart lies with the humble. Second, his heart lies with the desperate. Look at verse 20 and 22. And behold, a woman who had suffered from a discharge of blood for 12 years came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment. For she said to herself, if I only touch his garment, I will be made well. Jesus turned, and seeing her, he said, take heart, daughter, your faith has made you well. And instantly the woman was made well. We're in the middle of Jairus' request to Jesus. As he is on his way to go raise up Jairus' daughter, another woman comes needing help. She approaches him, and we're told that she has been suffering for a long time. The passage tells us she's been suffering from this bleeding for 12 years, and this is most likely a menstrual flow that has not ended for 12 whole years. We learn from the other accounts that she has spent all her money during this time on doctors and physicians in order to try to heal her, and yet all her money has been wasted because no one has been able to help. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, if her physical condition wasn't bad enough, we also know from the Levitical law that this means that she has been ritually unclean for the last 12 years. That as long as she could not stop this bleeding, that also anybody who came in contact with her would also be rendered ceremonially unclean, which means she has virtually been a pariah for the last 12 years. She has been rejected from the community and separated like a leper because of her risk of touching others. This also meant that religiously she was not allowed within the confines of the temple, and she would have been kept out from her friends, her family, her church, her synagogue. Can you imagine her pain? Can you imagine her suffering, her desperation? And it is in this desperation that brings us to this moment where she draws near to Jesus. We learn that she sneaks into the crowd. Mark and Luke tell us this, that she hopes not to be seen, and so she sneaks up behind Jesus, telling herself that if I can touch his tassel, I could be made well. And now remember, if she is found out, she will be cast out as unclean. She will be scorned, laughed at, mocked, thrown out. And you can imagine she's probably covered up to some degree because she doesn't want to be seen or recognized. And she is superstitious. Not a little, but super. She thinks he's a holy man. If I can touch him, there might be some kind of magical power attached to him. And we can assume safely that she talks to the disciples after the fact, or at least shared her story with others, because Matthew tells us her inner thought. And so we find out she succeeds in touching his garment, and she is caught by Jesus. And this moment, you can kind of hear her heart get caught in her throat, her lungs, whatever. You can hear her kind of freeze in this moment, because as he turns around and he calls her out, you can imagine all these scenarios going through her head. Oh no, here we go. I'm going to be called out. There's going to be an outroar. People are going to throw me out. Right? We find out that she tries to escape unnoticed, but Jesus doesn't let her go. He turns in the midst of the crowds and the chaos. And in this pivotal moment, instead of rebuking her, instead of withdrawing with disgust, he receives her. And note how sweet and tender his words are to her. Take heart, daughter. Not, oh gosh, get away from me. Not, oh my goodness, I can't believe you thought that would be okay. Take heart, daughter. Take heart, meaning have courage. Be confident. Don't fear. I'm not going to cast you out. I'm not going to throw you. I'm not going to hurt you. Take heart, daughter. Affection, familial, deep affection, like family. You're not a stranger. You're not an outsider. Those three words, take heart, daughter, those are the very words she needed to hear. And in this moment, she's not just healed of her physical brokenness, but her spiritual brokenness. The 12 years of pain wiped out in 3 words. Take heart, daughter. We don't hear what happens to her next, but we hear her next words to her. Your faith has made you well. And that's profound. The word well there can also be used to talk about spiritual salvation. And we see that in the other passages. He's not just talking about her physical condition. He's talking about her whole self. This healing you truly needed, you are made well. You are healed. And he makes sure she understands it's not your superstition that healed you. Right? He says, touching my garment did nothing. There's no magic here. We don't need to go out and find the shroud of Turin or Jesus' left sock. Like he's saying, those things did not heal you. Your faith made you well. Your faith made you well. Your desperate faith in me is what saves you. My friends, do we have this desperate faith in Jesus? Do we have this desperate faith in Jesus? I think there's something that we all need to learn from this woman's faith. She was desperate enough to reach out. She was desperate enough to seek him out. And this desperation is what saved her. Right? Like many others, she had heard of his miracles, and she had heard of all that he had done, and she was desperate enough to go out to him and say, God, I need you. I've done everything I could in my life in the last 12 years to save myself from the situation, to get out of this plight, and yet nothing has worked. I've tested the waters. God, there's nothing else. If you can't save me, nothing else will. I'm going to seek you out no matter the cost, no matter what may happen to me. I'm going to reach out and I'm going to grab a hold of you. I need you. That's what desperation looks like. And my friends, there are some of you in here who probably feel the same way like my high school friend did. You're a self-made man or woman and you believe, I don't need anybody. I can do it myself. I can save myself. I can figure out the solution that I truly need. I do not need a God. In fact, to need anybody is weakness. And my friend, let me ask you, can you consider, what will you do when you come across a situation like this? When you face a situation you have no answer to. When you find yourself like Jairus or this woman, where you're helpless and without answers. And maybe you find yourself in such a situation right now. Would you consider that maybe God is speaking to you in your pain and he's directing you to himself? Perhaps he's placed you here so that you would recognize your need. And that you would see your desperation as not something to be hated, something to run from, but embraced, because God is using it to wake you up to the reality of human brokenness and your great need for him. It is a good thing to need him. It's a good thing to be desperate for him. As you see, his response to a desperate person is not mockery, it's not harsh, it's not condemning. He doesn't ignore her, but rather it's healing and compassionate. And my friends, he welcomes you to come in. He welcomes you to find rest in his arms. Would you consider today that it is a good thing to be desperate for him? And for those of you guys who are in here who find yourself like this woman, who find yourself in the midst of deep pain, long-standing pain that you have no answer to, would you also hear Jesus' words to you? Take heart. Take heart. Those who are afflicted, hopeless, in an endless season of despair. Perhaps you feel unseen by God, unseen by others. Do not forget what Jesus does right here. He's been called on to save a dead girl. He's in the throngs of a chaotic crowd who want so many things from him. He's being pulled in 1,000 different ways from 1,000 different people. And yet it is at this exact moment that he stops. Right there in that passage, he stops and he turns to give this woman his attention, his full attention. Then he calls her daughter. Because she's not just a number to him. She's not just a case to be solved. She is his daughter. And he knows her pain. He knows her intimately, what she has gone through the last 12 years. And he says, take heart. In other words, come close to me. Let me hold you. Let me heal you. My friend, if you are her, take heart. God says, come close. You can confidently approach the throne of grace. You can reach out. You can grab a hold. And you have nothing to fear here in my presence. You don't have to face the condemnation of this world any longer. You don't have to face the condemnation of your own soul. You don't have to pretend like it's okay. You don't have to pretend to have the answers. Take heart. I'll be your answer. My friend, it is in your Savior's arms that you will receive the healing that you so desperately long for. He will hold you fast. My friends, it is a good thing to be desperately in need of him. To my fellow believers here, my fellow Christians, those who have been Christians for a long time, have we lost this desperation? Have we lost this desperate faith? Especially those of us who sit here on these nice, cushy seats. My friends, this is the work of the enemy. Not the seats. The seats are fine. All right, but to lose our desperate faith, that's the work of the enemy. All right, he uses great success in our life to lead us to ruin. You see it throughout Israel's history, throughout the entire Old Testament. As soon as they received success, the devil used it to trick them into thinking, we've made it. We've done it. We've succeeded in taking care of ourselves. And oftentimes their success has led to their demise because they had become self-sufficient and they'd rejected God in the process. My friends, we cannot forget the desperation that first brought us near to him. Each day we need to be reminded of how much we need him. Otherwise our hearts grow cold and we become like those who've decided that we are no longer sick. As Jesus told us earlier, those who are not sick have no need of a physician. My friends, have we tricked ourselves into believing we have no need for a physician? Our faith is not get down on your knees, pray one time, and live the rest of your life with no need of Christ. My friends, to be a Christian, to be a follower of Jesus, is to recognize that each and every single breath is a gift from God. It is to recognize we desperately need him every single day. You ever wonder why your faith has grown cold? This is the answer every single time. We've forgotten we need him. We are no longer desperate for him. My friends, we cannot keep living like this. We need to return to him. We do not need to wait for the hand of discipline to come and wake us up. Turn to him. He is slow to anger and rich in love. He is steadfast and abounding in steadfast love for you and me. And those of you guys in here, finally address those who are much like this woman, who have been suffering through long-term physical, maybe psychological pain. I want to be very, very clear here. This passage is not teaching us that as long as we have enough faith, we will be made well. This passage is very much a descriptive passage rather than a prescriptive passage. There is no promise of such thing here. The healing is tied to specifically this woman's encounter with Jesus, but I do want to offer those of you guys in here who have gone through so much pain, I want to offer you a better promise that we are indeed given. It is the healing that is promised. It is one that is not just a temporary fix of the physical aches and illnesses and ailments that we face each day, but my friends, for those who follow Christ, there is an eternal fix to come. There is an eternal fix that is not just physical, but it is also spiritual, both spiritual and physical. I love that song we sang earlier, that on this day, there is a coming time, there is a coming day where we will face our Savior, and every single one of those aches and pains will be gone. They will be stolen away from us as if they never were there in the first place. And we will be made right again. We will be made whole again. And all those things that hurt us each day, they will no longer be there, and we will forget that they even afflicted us. It will be the work of our great King who has come to make us whole again. My friends, let us be desperate for this day to come, because it will. The last, God's heart lies with the unclean. It lies with the humble, the desperate, and finally here with the unclean. Look at verse 23. And when Jesus came to the ruler's house and saw the flute players and the crowd making a commotion, he said, "Go away, for the girl's not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But when the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took her by the hand, and the girl arose. And the report of this went through all that district. Immediately upon arriving at Jairus' home, we find this chaotic scene where in Palestinian culture, the person who died would have to be buried within 24 hours of their death. And so we have the flute players, the professional mourners, all gathered around with the crowd, all screaming, crying, and mourning at the same time. And this was part of the customs. It was very different from a Western funeral where it's silent and somber. No, here, you wanted it as loud and as chaotic in a sense as possible. And they are mourning her loss. And Jesus comes up to them and in almost a rude manner says, "Go away. This girl's not dead, but sleeping." For us reading it, we know that death to him is not very different from sleep. It's not permanent to him. But to those people, this was a ludicrous command, insulting even. And they laugh at him. And the word laugh there, it can also be understood as mocking and scoffing and laughing with contempt. In other words, you hear them jeering at him. How dare you? Who do you think you are? What do you think you are? Right? They've clearly heard of Jesus, and here they think he's in over his head, because up until this point, they've heard of his miracles. Sure, you healed people. You healed those who were sick, who were disabled. You cast out demons, but you've never raised anyone from the dead. And they think to themselves, this guy is about to be humbled. He's about to make a mockery of himself. And so they laugh. And yet Jesus has them put outside. And Jesus goes inside with the family and with 3 of his disciples, as we learn from Mark and Luke. And he goes up to this little girl and he raises her up from the grave. And up until this point, he's done many, many great things. And yet here we see him go a step further. And he scoffs at death. And the report goes out, and you can almost hear their jaws drop as this little girl walks out of that house, very much alive. My friends, let us not miss Jesus' heart here. Right? Both for Jairus' daughter and for the bleeding woman, in both cases, Jesus does something very incredible for them. Right? In order to heal the woman, what did he do? He allowed himself to be touched by her. And as a result, he becomes ceremonially unclean. For this little girl, he goes up to her corpse and he touches her, becoming ceremonially unclean in order to raise her. Because of his work, he makes both of them clean again. And in both cases, he becomes unclean for them. And in the same way, my friends, on that cross, Jesus takes away our uncleanliness. He takes our sins and he puts it on himself in order to make you clean, to make you pure and holy and righteous and beautiful for all of eternity. At great cost to himself. My friends, this is God's heart for the sinner. This is God's beautiful, compassionate, kind, and generous heart for the sinner. I'll finish with two things to consider. First off, do we scoff at the Lord? Be honest with you, this is a side note. This is not the point of the passage. There's something to be said about the crowd's response to Jesus and what we can learn from him. Some of us are like the crowd. We laugh at Jesus. We mock him. We reject him and his salvation. We can't wait to see him fail. And we reject him though we need him. And my friends, the passage says they are put outside. And that word can be translated to be driven out. Those who scoff at Jesus receive the very thing they want. They will be driven out. And they will not receive the salvation they laugh at. I don't want to go all fire and brimstone on you guys, but do consider, and I want you to ask, what do you do? What do you want the answer to pain and suffering and death? All right, it's a great question that we cannot escape, and it chases each one of us down, and it demands an answer from us. I asked, would you learn from Jairus? Would you learn from this woman? Because the answer is staring you right in the face. This king does not want to drive you out. He does not want to cast you out. Rather, he wants to welcome you in and experience life for the first time. My friends, if you're scoffing at Jesus, would you stop and consider, how do you answer death? Because there is an answer, and it's right here. And last thing I want us to ask, do we have this same love for the outcast? My Christians, I'm specifically speaking to you, my fellow believers, do we have the same love for those who are outside, those who are suffering? Because we see from Jesus' miracles this same theme repeated again and again, where he goes out of his way to help the suffering. And we see that it costs him. He took upon himself their uncleanliness to cleanse them. And the cross shows us that perfect example where he makes them clean again at great cost to himself. I want to ask my friends, the church, we the church, do you recognize we are called to love outsiders in the same manner? Let me present to you two examples, and then we'll be done. Two examples. Imagine first off yourself. Imagine yourself in this situation where you perhaps have the opportunity of a lifetime. If you could have two jobs, one job could pay you 7 figures and you'll be set for life. It'll bring with it glory and honor, prestige. Your name will be up in the magazines. People will know you and you'll be well known in your position, and you can make a killing. A second job pays much less, a fraction, and it's working with the least. The immigrants in a poor community where there is no prestige, there is no glory, perhaps not even respect. Now, this same opportunity was presented to one of our members, and I just asked him before the service, because I finally remembered to ask him, George, where he was presented with this opportunity to make much of himself. Now, there's nothing wrong with choosing that first job. In fact, many of us, we can hear our parents in our head going, good, we've made it. I don't know why that accent came in, I'm sorry. You've made it. This is what I, poured all my life savings into. All my work is to make you into role number 1, job number 1. How many of us would choose number 2? To love others at great cost to self, where it would cost you greatly in the eyes of this world. How many of us would choose number 2? Because I think Jesus would choose one very clearly over the other. Or, second example, Camp Tunes just ended this past Friday. And there we also saw this great example being played out. See, with our kids who serve at camp, they're given an opportunity during their summers to do one of two things. One is get ahead for themselves, extracurriculars, academics, build up your resume. Or you could volunteer for 7 weeks. Work with kids who, are kids. They don't particularly appreciate you or love you at times. It is hard work. You get there at 8 in the morning and sometimes you don't leave till 6 at night. You're not paid a dime. While at the same time, you watch your friends and you see them getting ahead. We had kids who essentially lost their spots on their sports teams while their friends spend the entire summers getting ahead, training every single day. We had kids who got scolded by their parents for wasting their time not studying, not practicing violin. Which choice would you make, my friends? Because to follow Christ, there's one clear answer. It is to love others at cost to self. It is to look at the cross and say, my God, how could you love me in such a manner? When I come before you with all my brokenness and nothing to offer, you would still have me come close, and then you allow me to serve you in this manner? My God, what would it look like if our church were to do the same and to love the community in such a way? The world would be changed. My God, would you have mercy on us and would you call us to love others in the same way? How is he calling you to love your community in the same manner? Let me pray for us. God, would you bring us down to our knees? Show us our need. Show us how desperate we are without you. Humble us. Humble us and crush our pride. Show us how all the works of our hands are for naught. And yet show us how compassionate and kind you are to those who come before you with great need. God, show us sinners, us broken people, that your grace extends and covers us to an eternity. And transform us in such a way, God, that we would go forth and love others in the same manner that you have loved us. Do not let us keep living the same selfish, prideful kind of way. But God, would we come before you and find true healing and find that your beautiful mercy restores us and your grace draws us close to yourself, that we may be by your side as your sons and daughters. And one day, God, we will indeed look you in the face and we will find nothing but love, gentleness, compassion, kindness, and patience. And we will get to dwell with you forever and ever. God, we long for that day. Pray this in your Son's name.